This is Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Now, we've talked about the situation there with ISIS. Let's see what comes out of that. But we need actual analysis, insight, not just vulgar sloganeering. And then with the Ukraine situation, notice Russia reaching out to Iran for various kinds of economic cooperation. Russia is not isolated, despite the lunatic assertions of the State Department and Kerry, and instead there is a block of states now emerging. The problem is they have got to offer an alternative to the Anglo-American finance system. This is not so much a matter of ideology in the old sense. In other words, you don't need some sort of global synthetic ideology, dialectical materialism, something like this. That will not do. But what you need is a different kind of economics. And again, the kind that you need, you can call it the German system with Friedrich List. You can call it the American system with Henry Carey, Hamilton, people like this. You can call it the French system. It goes back to Jean-Baptiste Colbert. You can call it the MITI, Ministry for International Trade and Industry of Japan. You can call it the Taiwan experience. A lot of that has been taken over by the Beijing government. But you do get the idea. Maybe it's the Medici system, industrial development through textile manufacturing, back in the Trecento, Quattrocento, the 1300s and the 1400s. But this is the idea. That's the kind of global alternative that we need. So there has to be a greater sense of urgency on that front. And again, import substitution, understandable as a war measure under duress. You have to simply cut off various kinds of imports. You got to use your foreign exchange very, very carefully. Use it to meet your overriding military needs. But the way to counterattack the Anglo-Americans when they become rambunctious is to attack them on the plane of finance, because this is where they dominate the world. And of course, once you talk about that, you've then got oligarchs and other powerful interest groups. You've got Medvedev, you've got Kudrin, you've got Gref, you've got Nabiullina, I'm pretty sure, who are not going to be interested in that. And there may also be problems with China. But this is exactly where statesmanship has to come in. And it's possible also to take a somewhat longer view and wait for the Anglo-Americans to attack more, so that they are going to be viewed worldwide as the absolute aggressor if you have to do something that's going to cause, frankly, a worldwide dollar panic. The dollar is much more vulnerable than the ruble, at least under current management. So there we have it. The military campaigning season imposes its own objective timetable, and if there is going to be a military campaign, it would have to start in the next month or so, I would think. If the Ukrainians go ahead and block the gas transfer to Europe, then they will put themselves very much in the wrong. Now, concerning Israel, Palestine, Gaza, my critique of Hamas, I'm afraid, has to come to the fore. We've just had this experience of Hamas breaking the ceasefire. So the military wing of Hamas, the extremists, in other words, people whose mental home, whose political home is very much the Libyan jihadis, the Syrian jihadis, the ISIS. That's Hamas, right, with the Muslim Brotherhood in the background, Qatar providing the money. So Hamas has started shooting. This shows incompetent and destructive political leadership, reckless and irresponsible, incalculable folly, I would say. Remember, Israel has always wanted Hamas. Israel was always uncomfortable dealing with the moderate Fatah, Palestinian Liberation Organization, the Arafat people, his heirs, Abu Mazen, the Erekats, and Hanan Ashrawi, and so forth. it's easier to deal with Hamas. They've always wanted Hamas. And the ability of Hamas to pull that coup d'etat after the election, the evidence seems to be coming in that the Israelis actually favored the coup d'etat by Hamas, which they could have stopped, but they didn't. And then perhaps they also helped it along. We have to go back and look at this question of this kind of ideology, Islamism as a political ideology. If we go back to the Cold War, let's go back to the 1950s and 60s, when the U.S. did not have a totally free hand, and when the British did not have a totally free hand, because they were locked in a Cold War with the Soviets, there was, under the banner of the non-aligned movement and the anti-colonial movement of those years, which were more hopeful than what we've seen so far lately, there was a tendency of the countries in the Middle East, the Arab, Muslim countries, to throw off the colonial yoke and choose what? Not to choose religious governments, but to choose governments that were anti-colonial, pro-development, big projects, read Aswan High Dam and things like this. They were secular, they were probably military, they were modernizing, and they were populist. And that's Nasser of Egypt, General Qassem of Iraq. U.S. played Saddam against Qassem. Assad's in Syria, Gaddafi of Libya, very much a disciple of Nasser. Similar things in Algeria, Arafat in the PLO, and so forth. Mossadegh in Iran is something similar, a little bit different, more advanced society perhaps. But avant la lettre, he's also essentially secular, anti-colonial, modernizing, populist, and so forth. It's only when the U.S. becomes the only game in town that we get these these Islamist movements funded by Saudi Arabia. Remember, Saudi Arabia was the sworn enemy of Nasser, right? The voice of the Arabs from Cairo spent a lot of time attacking Saudi Arabia, among other things because they had slavery legal until 1965. So you can't blame the Arab world for the excesses of ISIS. ISIS and similar things are growths that have been fostered by imperialism from the outside. Hamas, a case in point, founded by General Sharon. Sharon of Israel made it possible for them to grow. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio.